What is at stake here now that this deal seems to be almost in jeopardy? At the 11th hour, we're hearing President Trump also chiming in, saying that the DOJ is likely to actually block this deal. He says it's maybe litigation. They've thrown some options out there, including the likes of selling Turner, which owns CNN. Was this all a surprise to you, Jennifer?
Well, regulatory approvals are always lengthy. We're well over a year into this approval process, and they're never certain. So I remember a year or so ago, a couple of years ago, Comcast and Time Warner Cable, that got turned down by the regulators. So nothing is ever certain, and nobody goes into these deals guaranteed of any particular outcome. So I would be surprised if this one didn't ultimately close, but we'll have to wait and see what happens next.
Is AT&T prepared to go to court on this as well, or is there actually a middle ground between what the DOJ is asking for right now when it comes to some of these divestment of assets and what AT&T wants? Well,
there could be all sorts of ways this gets resolved, a negotiated settlement, or there could ultimately be litigation. But again, I think AT&T's made it very clear that they intend on working through this and closing this deal. It's very strategically important to them, so it's hard for me to imagine right now that we don't get to the finish line.
Why do you think this came in the 11th hour, it seems? I mean, we all thought that this deal was done pretty much just a couple of weeks ago, and we are hearing the likes of the DOJ and President Trump chiming in on this. Does it set the stage for what we could see in 2018 when it comes to media companies and M&A, like T-Mobile as well as Sprint as well?
Well, I definitely think it's not good when we have regulatory uncertainty, because I think most of us were expecting that this would take a while to get approval, but would get approval ultimately. So now that it's sort of gone sideways to some extent, I think that's going to be concerning for everybody in the industry contemplating other deals, whether that's anything else in the wireless sector or any other communications and media combinations. I think all of this is a little unsettling for everyone. But again, I would expect that AT&T will get this deal closed. It's going to be obviously now a longer journey on the regulatory side than they had expected.
Yeah, there's also been talks of Disney said to be buying Fox's film and TV networks. It's raised a lot of questions, Jennifer, on the scale of media as these media conglomerates begin to grow. I mean, do you see actually more potential disruption in this space, given the fact that we've seen the Facebooks, the Netflixes, the Amazons really changing the consumer behaviors when it comes to digital content?
Well, I certainly think we're seeing a response in terms of potential consolidation of everybody, not Facebook, not Microsoft, not Apple, not Amazon, because that's really the competition. So we worked on Scripps Discovery earlier in the year, that combination. I think a lot of media companies, when they look at the competition provided by the Amazons of the world, probably have no choice but to consider consolidation trades to make themselves more relevant. It's just an increasingly competitive business, and Netflix and others just seem to go from strength to strength.
What about an Apple-Netflix kind of tie-up? I mean, some people have been talking about, this cash war chest that Apple has. Why not spend it on something like buying a Disney or a Netflix versus spending on original content itself?
Yeah, and I'm sure Apple's looked at everything, and they could buy any one of these companies. They've certainly got the financial resources to do that. But I'm not sure that they want to plant the flag with one particular player. I think they like to play all options and have all partnerships open and available to them. So I don't see that happening yet. At some point in the future, I think if any one of the big tech companies goes and tries to do a deal like that, we may see everybody else responding. But right now, I think they're watching what's going on in traditional media, with a great deal of interest.
Why don't we talk a little bit more about China? Of course, with these tech frenzies and IPOs that we've been seeing, even with Razer debuting today, a lot of the M&A activity has been fueled by the likes of these big tech giants like Alibaba as well as Tencent. Do you see this trend continuing?
I do. I think there's a lot of M&A that's likely to happen next year, certainly in the US in particular with tax reform coming. And I also think companies in China looking to make acquisitions as well. They've got great currencies, they've got great financial resources. Again, regulatory issues can get in the way of some of that, and we've seen some uncertainty around CFIUS in the US, a little hard to predict how they're
the Lattice deal as well.
Yeah, and just others. I think it's a little bit hard to. There's not a lot of clarity as to how some of these regulatory agencies are actually evaluating deals right now. So that's going to create a little bit of uncertainty and perhaps a little hesitation. But once that settles down and once there's a better sense of what can get approved and what can't, we think we'll see cross-border activity pick up.
Would you call it, or is it still too early to say it's a coming of age when it comes to Chinese tech? Does this actually shift the paradigm now from the U.S. to China?
Well, I think that paradigm shifted a long time ago, actually. I think maybe the world is sort of picking up on that, certainly getting talked about a lot more than it has been before. You know, I arrived in Hong Kong over the weekend to Singles Day on Saturday, and just the phenomenal success of that event for Alibaba is sort of mind-boggling relative to what happens in the US.
Jennifer, just one last question. Tax reform, what does that mean for M&A evaluations for 2018?
I think clarity would be a good thing, because right now it's very hard for boards to push the button on a deal when they're not quite sure what the tax line is like. So clarity is the most important thing right now, and then I think we'll see M&A activity pick up.